For this episode of 10 Forward Test Kitchen, we've taken a leaf, or rather a root, from the Delta Quadrant's finest to recreate a dish that's nutritious, delicious, and robust enough to sustain the lost crew of Voyager for 7 long years. It's Leola Root Soup.
Captain's Log. Stardate 53918.0. With main power reserves running low, we've been forced to limit replicator use to only the most basic of essentials. Emergency rations are dwindling, and so too is our patience with them. Fortunately, we have it on good authority from a trusted and highly reputable source that this planet holds an abundance of a rare and much-needed resource. With unpredictable terrain and transporters offline, I've dispatched an away team to traverse its valleys and ridges, in search of what we've been told is the finest source of vitamins and minerals in the entire quadrant. At long last, our weary crew may be on the verge of a truly satisfying meal.
So what is Leola Root? Neelix first introduces the crew of the USS Voyager to this humble root in the episode State of Flux, when the ship makes a stop on an unnamed planet to forage for supplies. What the self-appointed chef and morale officer pulls from the ground is said to be one of the best sources of vitamins and minerals in the entire quadrant. Leola is described as an ugly little root which only needed a few hours stewed in a light herbal broth to stop you noticing the mildew. From that moment on, the crew of Voyager had to remain on their guard, as Neelix seemed determined to incorporate Leola Root into just about every dish he made. Almost immediately, in fact, as he is said to have gotten into a fight with the treacherous Seska for suggesting they use Leola Root to stretch some mushrooms she had found in order to make soup. Initially, it was Kes who maintained the Leola Root crop in the hydroponics bay, supplying Neelix with just enough to last throughout the ship's 7-year voyage, all while the crew continued to complain about its taste. In parturition, Neelix laments that he can't cook up a delightful Leola Root broth for a repto-humanoid infant he and Tom Paris encounter. In The Shoot, wrongly imprisoned Harry Kim and Tom Paris find themselves so desperately hungry that they even wish they could eat a bowl of Neelix's Leola Root stew. In waking moments, Neelix suffers a nightmare in which he is boiled alive in a perfectly seasoned pot of Leola Root stew. Leola Root, for better or worse, also appears on the prison menu for incarcerated crew members and visitors alike. Leola Root Soup is served to Mr. Suitor in basics, while the demoted Paris begrudgingly receives Leola Root stew several times a week in 30 days. Talaxian spice stew, served over Leola Root pilaf, is fed to Nagian convicts in Repentance. And like any good mountain doctor, Neelix cites Leola Root as a cure for most ailments, offering Leola bark tea to settle Ensign Kim's upset stomach in Workforce, and even using it as a soothing ointment for his own sunburn in Tonkatse, which unfortunately results in an allergic reaction. In time, other Voyager crew members attempt to surpass the Master himself by cooking with Leola Root. In Riddles, after suffering memory loss, Tuvok whips up a sweet Leola Root tart, and as part of her ever-expanding set of skills, even 7 of 9 manages to deliver a cream of Leola soup for the senior staff in the episode The Void. And finally, in Fury, Neelix includes Leola Root snacks for Kes upon her departure, said to be one of her favourite foods. Behind the scenes, it's quite obvious for anyone with eyes that the Leola Root prop seen in State of Flux is quite literally a ginger root, painted gold with some green fronds grafted on top. This is likely intentional, given that actor Robert Beltran has to bite into it and spit it out, a reaction that probably wasn't all that difficult to achieve. Rather ironically, Leola Root does not appear in the 1999 Star Trek cookbook, co-authored by Neelix himself, Ethan Phillips. However, cream of Leola soup does feature in the 2022 Star Trek cookbook, and that's the recipe we're happy to present today, because out of all the recipes we road tested from the book, this one was quite frankly delicious. So put any consumer complaints from the Voyager crew aside and strap yourself in for a dish that's hearty, creamy, a little sweet, a little earthy, and a true Delta Quadrant classic. We start with a saucepan over medium heat, letting it warm up before adding 1 tablespoon of olive oil and 1 tablespoon of butter. Once the butter has melted, add 1 chopped brown onion and 2 minced garlic cloves, cooking until softened, golden, and fragrant. Next, add 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, stirring to help caramelize the onions. Once the sugar has dissolved, add 4 chopped medium-sized parsnips and stir to coat. Following that, add 2 cups of chicken stock. Ours is made to the ratio of 1 teaspoon of chicken stock powder to every 250 milliliters of boiling water. Bring the pot to the boil and cook for around 25 minutes, stirring occasionally until the parsnips are soft. We'd be remiss to make Leola Root Soup without talking a little bit about the raconteur himself, Neelix. When we first meet Neelix, he is a merchant overseeing a debris field near the Okompa homeworld. He offers to help the newly arrived Voyager search for their missing crew in exchange for a meal and a bath, ultimately leading them to the Kazon and to Kes. He initially tricks the crew into trading water for Kes and plans to abandon them until Kes convinces him that it would be wrong to leave after the crew helped him. By the end of Caretaker, Neelix asks to join the crew, selling himself as a guide to the Delta Quadrant, a cook for the crew, and a self-appointed morale officer. For the next few seasons, the crew mostly seems to tolerate Neelix, not helped by his habit of inserting himself into day-to-day ship operations, from senior staff meetings to converting the captain's private dining room into a galley. Much of this behaviour stems from insecurity. Neelix feels intimidated by Starfleet and desperately wants to prove his usefulness. This leads him to try his hand at everything from engineering to security. By the Season 3 episode Fair Trade, Neelix becomes so worried that his knowledge of the Delta Quadrant is reaching its limits that he becomes embroiled in a narcotics deal to secure a map, fearing that Captain Janeway will dismiss him. However, Janeway reminds him that regardless of his usefulness as a guide, he has responsibilities to the crew, who are his family, and that they must rely on one another no matter how difficult the journey becomes. From then on, Neelix's overcompensating personality begins to settle, and he grows more comfortable in his role aboard Voyager, frequently acting as ambassador and trade negotiator. His past experience as a merchant, engineer's assistant, and even in waste management is called upon across many away missions. To add an earthy, almost mildew-like depth to the soup, we're going to add 2 shiitake mushrooms. These have been rehydrated in boiling water and roughly chopped. Since everything will be blended later, they don't need to be perfect, just small enough for the blender. Once the parsnips are soft, we honour Leola Root's on-screen body double by grating a 2 to 3 centimeter piece of fresh ginger directly into the pot for a little extra bite. Next, grate in about 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, adding a warm, aromatic note that complements the soon-to-be creaminess of the soup. Stir everything through, then remove the saucepan from the heat and place it on a heat-proof surface. Slowly stir in 1/2 cup of heavy cream, making sure that it doesn't overheat and separate. Once combined, use a stick blender to blitz the soup until it's completely smooth, ensuring that there are no remaining chunks of parsnip. When the soup reaches a silky, creamy consistency, it's ready to serve. Ladle 2 or 3 generous scoops into a bowl, drizzle with a little olive oil, add a pinch of pepper, and finish with a few sprigs of parsley. And there you have it, Leola Root Soup. Leave your preconceptions at the door because this one is an absolute winner. It's essentially a one-pot soup that's incredibly easy to make. It's thick, it's creamy, it's warm and hearty with a little sweetness and a gentle bite. But most importantly, it is delicious. You'll be heading back to that mess hall for a second or maybe even a third bowl. We've also been blown away by the response to our previous episode on Gach. It's been amazing to hear that viewers have actually tried cooking some of these recipes for themselves, from meal prepping with roommates to putting together fun family dinners. Please send us pictures of your creations because we would love to post them on the channel. Obviously, we make this show to share our love for Star Trek and the food it presents, so it's incredibly rewarding to see people engaging with 10 Forward Test Kitchen in that way. We also love hearing your suggestions on how to make these dishes even better, like the idea of adding katsuobushi as a garnish. As the flakes react to heat, they wiggle and squirm, giving the illusion of life, which is perfect when you're serving something meant to resemble gak. If you've enjoyed this recipe, be sure to check out the original version in the 2022 Star Trek cookbook. Thanks for watching, and until next time.